Jacobson, for those of you who don't know me, and I am so excited to be standing here today, welcoming you to December's Portland debut and the celebration of the 5th issue of December's Modern Era. I want to really thank TaborSpace for providing us with an amazing and perfect venue. This is, if you haven't been here before, you should take the time to walk around and go through the sanctuary and the other spaces. You're doing amazing things here, and I'm really impressed. I want to thank Portland for being one of the most literature-friendly cities in the country. Many of you probably know December's remarkable story, its legendary role in the literary world, and its revival in 2013. And if you haven't heard the story already, you can visit our website and read about it, or get a copy of the revival issue, which gives a good explanation. At some point, I think, we'll be ready to move past December's past life and the 32-year gap in its publication schedule. But we're not quite there yet, because what December is today still has so much to do with what December had been, which was, and I hope still is, a community unto itself. What made December a pioneer and an icon from its inception in 1958 through the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s was its commitment to excellence, its ability to spot nascent talent and to nurture that talent, and its willingness to provide a forum for veteran writers and artists experimenting with new ideas. So a month or two before December's revival issue came out 2 years ago, one of our contributors in that issue, a poet in Brooklyn, emailed me and said, well, why don't you have a launch party in New York? I'm on the board of Poets House and I'll help organize it. So we said, sure, okay, off we went to New York and celebrated our rebirth there. And then when our second issue came out, our art editor, Buzz Spector, said the owner of an art gallery in Chicago had approached him wanting to host literary events at his gallery. Chicago's close to St. Louis, where we are. So we had a launch party in Chicago. And then at some point after that, I was having a conversation with one of our advisory editors, poet Grace Cavalieri, who produces the radio program, The Poet and the Poem, on public radio, broadcast from the Library of Congress. And Grace said, come to DC, be a guest on the radio show, and we'll do a launch party there. So last fall, we went to DC, and we celebrated the release of our 3rd issue at the Writers Center there. And then this just past spring, we were already going to LA to have a booth at the LA Times Festival of Books. And we figured as long as we were in the neighborhood and we had a new issue out, we'd have a launch party there too. So I'm pretty sure that not many literary journals take their show on the road like this. And it wasn't obviously something we consciously set out to do. These other events sort of sprang up organically. But in the process, we discovered that celebrating each issue in a different city and celebrating December's contributors in that city is really an ideal way for us to fulfill our goals of nurturing writers at every stage of their development and bringing writers and readers together as a community. So we decided to make it an intentional practice, this traveling release party thing. And when we sat down to figure out where we should go next, now that we're planning things and not just responding to invitations or circumstances, it took all of about 3 seconds to determine that Portland was our obvious choice. As you all obviously know, since you're here, Portland is known as a literary city, but we actually have evidence of that. We have more contributors, more submitters, and more subscribers in Portland than in any other city in the country. December's relationship with Portland really goes back to the very beginning. Vern Rutsala, I don't know if any of you are old enough to know who he was one of December's early poetry editors. William Stafford, Vi Gale, Albert Drake, Barbara Drake were all names that appeared in December countless times in December's first incarnation, as well as Raymond Carver, whose first 4 stories were all in December and who came from Oregon. So I'm grateful and proud that our Portland connection was revived along with our publication. And in addition to our 4 presenters tonight, I also want to give a shout out and acknowledgement to our other Oregon contributors. Peter Sears, your Oregon Poet Laureate, first appeared in December 1971 and again in our 2013 revival issue. Lawson Anada, another Oregon Poet Laureate, published 7 poems in 5 issues of December between 1961 and 1970 and came back with a wonderful meditation on his life as a poet in our revival issue. Mary Shivas graciously judged our 2nd Jeff Marks Memorial Poetry Prize and has been a supportive presence since the beginning. we featured the work of artist Julie Green, who lives in Corvallis, in our third issue, a selection of her installation, The Last Supper. I don't know if any of you have seen these. They're plates that she's painted depicting the final meal requests of every prisoner who's ever been executed in the United States penitentiary system. So we know that words are just one of many ways to tell a story. Garrett Lovis, over here, who was the winner of our very first Kurt Johnson Prose Award in nonfiction for his essay NQR, is also here. And then there's our current, is Tabitha Blankenbiller here, who lives in Portland, was in our second issue, and Dan Encarnacion was in our last issue, and our current issue, Mary Lemormand and Jose Angel Aragus, who each have two truly spectacular poems in this new issue. Jose's poems are short, Mary's poems are less short, and all four poems pack a profound wallop, and you shouldn't miss an opportunity to read them. And Jean Morel, where did you go? Way back there, who came in from Seattle to celebrate with us, whose poems have been in 3 out of our 5 first issues, and she'll have 2 more in our spring 2016 issue. So I don't want to talk too much because we do have an impressive and dynamic group of readers tonight, and I want to give them all their due. But I want to acknowledge just a couple of other key individuals who are really important to December's revival that everyone here should know who they are. So I want to give a shout out to Judy Kramer, our business manager / development director / event planner / videographer. She'll be at the table over there after the reading, so stop and introduce yourselves. And a lot of you have emailed or phoned or Facebook messaged with Jennifer Goldring, who's been our managing editor since the first of the year, and I'm sad that we couldn't all come to Portland together because I know Jen feels as connected to each of you and to Portland writers as much as you feel connected to her. So I'm going to go back to talking about our revival issue for just a second again. So the plan then was to make it a then and now themed issue, featuring some new work by writers who had been in December in its first incarnation, and some writers who would be new to December's pages. So as we were planning this revival, I wrote a letter to 160 people whose work had appeared in December between 1958 and 1981, who were still actively writing and whose addresses we could track down. And we invited them to submit new work, announcing the revival. The hope was that maybe 15 or 20 of them would respond, and that would be a basis for attracting new submitters. Well, 90 of the 160 responded, all sending new work, which meant 400 poems and 32 stories or essays. So we shifted the plan a little bit and decided to devote half the space in the revival issue to original Decemberists and half to new voices. So that meant that by the time John Sibley Williams first submitted work to us in May 2013, we had already accepted more than 70 poems for the revival issue, which was already a little too much. We liked John's poems a lot, but we were new and nervous about making any missteps, so we didn't want to just come out and say, sorry, we didn't really plan for so many submissions that were already full. So we sent a polite note and hoped that he would send new work our way again. Well, we read blindly, meaning we don't see authors' names or identifying information until we're ready to respond to them. So we weren't going to necessarily know if he sent new work, but we were hoping. And then earlier this year, we got a submission that caused the first reader to comment, in all caps, mind you, "I love these." And then she added, "I enjoy the crispness of voice, the new presentation of nature imagery, and the satisfying ambiguity of these poems." And then the second reader on our staff also responded in all caps, so I'm not sure what it is about our staff in the all caps, saying, "I love the small story of us and what one studies what's there. They have such spectacular and unusual imagery. The syntax and its precision is something to behold and admire. My vote is for these two. They fit together nicely." And then our very wise poetry editor, Jennifer Tappenden, weighed in with this. "These are all really great poems. I can see small story and one studies together. But there's also something compelling about alter that informs the other poems. I'm going to argue for taking all 3 of them together because I think alter provides a counterweight to the other 2 that deepens all 3 poems." She's a smart woman, that Jen, and I do what she tells me to. So we took all 3. John is a gifted poet whose work has been appreciated and published by more than 100 publications. He's the author of 6 chapbooks and 1 full-length collection, and is the co-founder of the Inflectionist Review, And it's my great pleasure to introduce John Sibley Williams.